Welcome to the CEO Insider Podcast, brought to you by YTexas. My name is Sandy McIlree. In this episode, we'll talk to the CEO of Firefly Aerospace, Dr. Tom Markusic. We'll talk to Tom about the Firefly Academy and Firefly at the University of Texas at Austin, Firefly's recent contract with NASA, and how Firefly Aerospace plans to bring space to everyone. Enjoy this episode of the CEO Insider Podcast, brought to you by YTexas, with the CEO of Firefly Aerospace, Dr. Tom Markusic. Tom, when you have time, and if you're ever at a cocktail party or a social function or something like that, you meet somebody, someone introduces you to someone, and the conversation goes to, so, Tom, what do you do for a living? What do you tell them?
I tell them I have a startup rocket company.
And then their next question is?
Well, I think the interesting thing is that space seems to be universally interesting to people, regardless of people or engineers or even in technical professions. It's really interesting that there's just something intrinsic about space that captures people's imagination. So, fortunately, the conversation usually is engaging, and you don't feel like you're just droning on trying to tell someone about something boring you're doing. So that's always cool, and there are a lot of connections just to the past. People have relatives, or they remember Apollo or something like that. So there always seems to be these points of contact in conversations when it comes to what we're doing. But then naturally it leads into, like, why are you doing this? Are you, trying to land on Mars or something? And, then we explain how the work that we're doing is real business and how it's tied to what's been going on for the last 20 years in the information revolution. And conversation usually goes for there.
And what you're doing is your project right now, Firefly Alpha, which is scheduled for launch this fall. Are you still on schedule for that September 2019?
Right now, our schedule slipped to December 2019, but right now we're saying 2019.
Firefly Alpha will deliver a payload of about 1,000 kilograms, correct?
Yes, correct.
Can you give us an idea of how much interest there is for this?
There is a lot of interest. We have over $1 billion in contracts or memorandums of understanding associated with launching on our vehicle, our Alpha vehicle in particular.
And following the Alpha, of course, is Beta, which will do almost 4 times the payload, correct?
That's correct.
You've been quoted as saying space is our future and that you want to make space for everyone. How do you plan to do that?
Well, we have to change the economics of access to space. Historically, it's been incredibly expensive and inaccessible to a few. So what's happening now is companies like Firefly are trying to dramatically lower the cost and create vehicles that allow companies and individuals to access space in ways that would have been impossible in the past. And I also say space is our future because it also has to just do with our economy and our society. When you look ahead to jobs and what people will be working on, the 21st century is not going to be about world dominance for America in teddy bears and underwear, but technology is somewhere that we always seem to be able to hold an edge. And space is one of those areas that I think will become increasingly important for people to work in the United States, at least, for us to maintain our economic preeminence in the world.
Dr. Markusic, when the average American thinks of private space travel, they think of Virgin Galactic, they think of SpaceX, they think of you, of course, Firefly. Tell us how Firefly is different than the other two.
Yeah, we are a company that is trying to find the optimal way to make money in space. So we don't have the same sort of exploration mission that other people are looking at, and human space flight. Human space flight is very hard, and if you put that as a boundary condition on your business from the outset, you better have a whole lot of money to get there, because engineering a vehicle that can accommodate the presence of humans and then all the safety issues associated with that makes a difficult problem, a very, very difficult problem. So, from the outset, we tip our hats to Jeff and Elon and and say I'm glad somebody's doing that human space flight, but we will focus on what will allow us to become a viable company as soon as possible, and the areas that we think have the most commercial growth potential.
As a person that makes their living in space, how amazing is it to you this year, marking the 50-year anniversary of landing a man on the moon? Is that still amazing to you?
Yeah, I know. When you actually work on something, you realize how hard it is, and just building a rocket that is, our rocket's probably 100 times smaller than the rocket they built to go to the moon, and that's really hard. So when you try to contemplate what they did in the 60s without the benefits of the computational tools that we have today and the computers and such, it is pretty mind-boggling. I had the good fortune when I worked at NASA to also know some of the early people that were involved in that. In fact, I knew Wernher von Braun's chief scientist. His name was Ernst Stuhlinger, and he was actually worked in Germany in World War II under von Braun, and so he had this life where they were demonstrating their rocket engines to Adolf Hitler in a bunker at one point, and then at another point he was in the United States celebrating the landing on the moon, and it is just incredible to hear those stories and what that generation did. So those kind of relationships and those stories have always been very inspiring and impactful to me.
Well, you are inspiring and impacting a lot of youth at the University of Texas. Let's talk about the Firefly Academy. Let's talk about Firefly at UT.
And as I said earlier, there seems to be a universal interest and appeal in space, and then within engineering it gets even amplified even more, the interest. But there aren't any practical opportunities, or very few practical opportunities, to really get involved in building spaceflight hardware and understanding it on a practical level, beyond what you get in books and training in a university. So the partnership with the University of Texas really allows us to fully satisfy the curiosity and the interest of students in working in this industry in space, because we can provide an opportunity for them to get real hands-on experience, to work with our engineers on projects, and in fact get help from our engineers to work on their own projects. So in particular, what we've done at UT is set up a laboratory for them to build their own rocket, and they will attempt to do a ballistic launch straight up to reach the edge of space, 100 kilometers, and they plan on doing that in the next couple of years, and we'll be funding that project through Firefly Academy. And the other neat thing is that there's a competition going on in the United States for the first university to accomplish this feat of getting to the edge of the space with something they've built. Gets a $1 million prize. So there's even another incentive there. So it's really cool affiliation. But going back to why are we doing Firefly? Our company will be succeed or fail by the quality of the people that we have here and the affiliations that we have. And University of Texas is a world-class university, and having affiliation and the interaction with the professors there is very beneficial to us as a business, and also having a conduit for interns and future employees to come to Firefly through the University of Texas is another rationale for us doing this, just beyond trying to help the youth or get their interest in STEM and space.
Yeah, I was going to say it sounds like a great opportunity to identify talent early and have a relationship with them as they graduate from their studies and move on in life.
Yeah, it isn't a great opportunity to do that, but I think there was at some point when I was interacting with one student that was so smart, I thought to myself, hold on, am I creating a monster here that's going to learn everything and go and do his own thing?
Tell us about, and I want to go back, I want to bring up a month and a year and get your reaction to it, and I think you'll know exactly what I'm talking about. Going back to September of 2016, what first comes to your mind? September
2016, the first thing that comes into my mind is that Firefly was in very bad shape. At that time. We were running out of money. And also around that time, the Falcon 9, it was around that time, I'm not sure if exactly that time, but Falcon 9 blew up on the launch pad, which caused some tremors in the perceptions of investors that was actually impactful on us as well. I had one of our principal investors, sitting across the table from me, who said, "Can your rocket blow up too?" Well, yeah. So that was started. That was part of a cascade of events that led to us running out of money at Firefly. So for me, it's a painful period.
But you really came back from that, and Firefly is strong as ever now.
Yeah, we came back, and the thing about pushing through adversity is you learn along the way, and you come back stronger. So it's kind of a paradox, but failing often leads to greater success. And we're a much stronger company now. I think I'm a much stronger leader just from having had the experience and knowing what the pitfalls are and learning how to prioritize things and keep the most important things out front and not get distracted. More appreciative of the opportunity we have, and we've actually had the opportunity to make some practical changes, architectural changes to our launch vehicle that will make it an even more dominant force in the market. So the Alpha vehicle that we're fielding now with Firefly will be a much better vehicle, more competitive vehicle than had we not had that setback.
Let's talk about some good stuff. Let's talk about your partnerships, some relatively new partnerships. We'll start out with your contract with NASA. What is the partnership there, and what are you guys doing together?
So for NASA, we have a contract to be one of the suppliers for payload services to the moon. Mm-hmm. Now, this is part of our plan to expand our company. So the plan is to build launch vehicles like Alpha, and then once we've gotten to space, to expand our technical offering to include spacecraft, vehicles that operate in space. So we have a couple spacecraft that we've been working on. One is a solar electrical propulsion tug called an OTV, Orbit Transfer Vehicle. And that's an electric, solar-powered vehicle that operates in space like a tugboat, and it can haul things around from low Earth orbit to higher orbits or even out to the moon. So that'll be part of that mission. And then the other part is the lunar lander itself that we're engineering and will deliver, and that will be something that detaches from the OTV in lunar orbit and delivers payload to the surface of the moon. The OTV can then return to Earth and pick up more payloads.
Nice.
So that NASA contract plays into our expansion plans, and I think, I learned a lot at SpaceX as an employee there, and what made SpaceX successful. And if you recall, SpaceX had a small launch vehicle called Falcon 1, and then they had an opportunity through NASA to deliver commercial payload services to the space station. And I see a lot of parallels with what we're doing here. It was a recipe for success for them. In our case, we have the small launch, or Alpha, and we see the commercial lunar payload services as a similar opportunity to leverage a government need with our expansion and our growth.
Tom, my 9-year-old daughter, week before last, asked me, she said, "Dad, can Earth get hit by an asteroid?" And I said, I don't know how to answer that. She goes, "Well, would we know if it was going to happen?" And you are doing some work with York Space Systems tracking asteroids.
Yes.
Tell us about that.
Yes. I don't claim to be an expert on asteroids, but my understanding is we have a good grasp on, from a terrestrial telescopes and such, of near-Earth objects that pose a threat to the Earth. So the odds of something catastrophic like a dinosaur extinction event are I'd say zero. But local events with smaller objects, the smaller they become, the increasingly likely that they could happen. But we do need assets in space to give us better resolution of what's out there, what could be a threat, and then the other part is what we can do about it. And there are folks that have thought about ways to divert asteroids and such to protect the Earth. But as we were talking about earlier about the human spaceflight and the human exploration, it's not just for people like Elon, that have said that it's not just about something cool for people to do. It's actually something to protect us from catastrophic events like that by having people on Earth go and begin habitats in other places. It'll we have a single point of failure situation here with Earth. So it's a good question that your daughter had, and we at Firefly will be contributing to try to understand what the threat is, and there are other folks that are trying to find out how to mitigate the threat, and even other folks who are trying to just get away from the threat.
You also have a relationship, a contract with Surrey Satellite, which is a startup. Are you working with more startups?
Yeah, we work with a lot of startups. The reason Firefly exists is because there was a fundamental change in how satellites were being built and who was building satellites. In the past, there have been these giant monolithic Battlestar Galactica type satellites up in geosynchronous orbit that cost $1 billion. The barrier to entry to get into that business was super high, and there weren't very many players. In the last 20 years, the paradigm has shifted to building smaller satellites in low Earth orbit and using a distributed kind of a cloud-based mentality in performing similar services that could have been performed by these large satellites. But one of the consequences is that there's a whole lot of potential for small startups to start building small satellites like that. So you have a lot more entrants, and they need a ride to space, a very kind of a dedicated, specialized, good fit ride to space, which was really the genesis of Firefly and why we're building the small launcher.
You are, I noticed that you have some openings for engineers. How are you incentivizing talent to come to work at Firefly?
Space is a cool industry, and Firefly is the coolest new company in space. I firmly believe that. I've worked at all the big ones, and we're at the right point in that startup phase when it's a lot of fun. It's very exciting, and amongst the companies that are at this stage, I think we're the best company because I've purposely built the company in an environment that makes it just the coolest place to work. That all started with Texas. I came to Texas very purposefully because, and Austin in particular, because of the economic and regulatory climate, the tax base, the cost of living, and just Austin itself is a great place to live and work. Now, when you're trying to build a team around this business, the engineer is usually very gung-ho, wants to do it, and they talk to the spouse, and the spouse says, "Hey, where is it?" And the employee usually responds like, "Oh, it's in the Mojave Desert or in some other godforsaken place." But when we say it's in Austin, Texas, the spouse is like, I can find a cool thing to do there too. So it makes our business, our company, uniquely attractive. The last element of this is we've built the engineering, the production, and the testing all co-located. So it gives us a lot of logistical benefits, but it also makes the job much more interesting because the engineer can be working on an engineering problem at their desk, go to the manufacturing facility and interact with the people building the parts, and then go to the test facility and work on actually hands-on doing the rocket testing. There's no other company that has it all together like that I'm aware of.
That's very cool. It probably makes them feel like they're really accomplishing something.
Yeah, you're right, and it makes me even feel better because they are accomplishing something.
Right. You guys had a lot of buzz last year at South by Southwest, and YTexas helped you out with that. What do you have in store for this year?
This year, a few changes. I'll be giving a keynote address early in one of the sessions. Our booth will be twice the size as it was in the past, and we're also potentially planning to do an international model rocket launch competition at our test site that will take place at the same time as South by Southwest. We'll probably offer the same type of tour we did to people at South by Southwest. So those new elements will increase our involvement in South by Southwest even more.
I've really enjoyed chatting with you. I've learned quite a bit, and I can't wait to follow the success of you and Firefly. I think what you're doing is absolutely amazing.
Cool. I really appreciate that.